Welcome to Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Paul Dottino. I'm Lance Meadow. Good to be with you for the next 60 minutes as we're here to break down all the latest with respect to the New York Giants. And today, obviously, we'll be focusing on the release of the schedule late last week. And a reminder, multiple ways you can interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. You can find us on Twitter as well, hashtag Giants Chat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So I know you and Howard were on Friday's program and did talk a little bit about the schedule, but I figured we'd get a little bit more into detail with respect to what lies ahead for the Giants. And Paul, you and I have had conversations off the air, and individuals who have been following this show have heard me say this on the air, where we're not about looking at the schedule and saying, oh, man, the stretch from week 14 through week 17 is just absolutely brutal, because we have no idea what those teams are going to look like in week 14 and beyond. And the Giants learned that the year, unfortunately, Daniel Jones got hurt, right? That completely changed the dynamics of this team. So opponents are the same thing. But it is fair to look at travel, to look at geography, the time of the year that maybe a team is coming to you or you're visiting a team. Now, with that being said, I think obviously the optics, the biggest takeaway from the schedule at first look is, wow, the Giants are going to have to be road warriors right out of the gates with 7 games on the road in their first 10. Now, on the flip side, Paul, that means the second half of the season, you're going to be home for the majority of the slate. So there is a trade-off from that standpoint, but there's no doubt about it. Giants are going to be traveling a whole lot for a good portion of the first half of the season.
Well, yes, but, I will say this, and, the other day when I put up my schedule analysis, and you're right, by the way, and folks, let's understand one thing. While you cannot pick your opponents because the league does that for you, and you cannot pick the timing of those games.
You can make recommendations, though.
Yes, and you cannot pick the injury reports either as you approach those particular teams. What you can do is try to logistically deal with the different quirks and the different types of hurdles that the league throws you in terms of the start times, the air travel, the locations, and maybe pairing games together like the Giants will do with Arizona and San Francisco in the first month of the season. And that brings me back to your point. Yes, the Giants do have 7 road games in the first 11, I believe.
Correct, yeah. It's 7 of 10 if you dismiss the Dallas game, but it's 7 of 11 in terms of you including, obviously, week 1.
Right.
Because they're home for week 1.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
But the Arizona and San Francisco trips become one trip because they're going to make one trip out there and stay in Tucson. And then the second game of that doubleheader is on Thursday. It's not a Sunday-Sunday, it's a Sunday-Thursday. So John Mara had made that request of the league, and they went for it.
Sure.
So they've only got the 4-day layover till they get the second part of that game. So that kind of mitigates some of the hassle of one of the West Coast trips.
Yep.
Then I think the other thing that's very important to know too, Lance, the 2 late return landings where the Giants have primetime games on the road, followed by a Monday night home game against Seattle, which is a favorable logistical situation. Also, following one of the other primetime games on the road, they've got a Sunday game in Washington, which is also a very favorable logistical situation because it's just a mini train ride right down the East Coast.
And Buffalo's not a long trip to come back
from, too,
also.
So these are all kinds of things, and I had put this up on my Twitter last week when actually the schedule came out, but more to your point, and this is the one I wanted to mention more so than anything else. There are road games in weeks 5, 6, and 7, but those trips are minimized because they are Miami, Buffalo, and Washington. 3 very, very mild logistical issues.
All East Coast trips.
I mean, they train to Washington. Buffalo is a short little puddle jumper to Buffalo.
Yep.
And even Miami isn't really that much of an imposition flying down to Florida. So here they are with 3 road games in a row, but they're really not having to deal with a lot of travel logistics for those 3 games. So to me, I get when people are like, too many road games the first half of the schedule. No, actually, if you're going to have that many road games, this is probably the best schedule you could come up with.
Well, from a geographical standpoint,
Yes.
your point is, yeah. I mean, you're going to Las Vegas in week 9, but that's after Arizona, San Francisco back-to-back. So there's a little breathing room in between it in terms of those road trips. And, yeah, everything else. But we knew that going in, Paul, because we already saw the opponents that they were going to have to travel to. So you knew outside of the 3 West Coast road trips wasn't going to be overbearing, and the benefit of having them back-to-back, plus, to your point, on a short week. And here's the other thing. I think you alluded to this, but I want to expand more on it. After the back-to-back West Coast road trip, you have your mini bye because it's Thursday to Monday.
Correct.
So you have even more time to regroup, recalculate, get back to East Coast time. So I think that setup is extremely beneficial as well. And speaking of buys, they have an extremely late bye, one of the 2 latest buys this season, week 13. But after that, you've got 5 games, 3 of which are at home, which is what I was talking about because you're playing so many road games at the beginning. You then benefit from being home. And that means that we don't know how meaningful these games are going to be at the end of the year. Once again, too early to speculate. But a team like the Rams, they're going to have to come to the East Coast cold weather on New Year's Eve. Now, the Eagles, they're used to the weather, so I don't think that's a benefit. But a Rams team, right, that's used to being out on the West Coast, coming to you in cold weather, I think you'll welcome that. That's not a complaint.
5 straight NFC games to close out the schedule, which could be key to the wild card race.
Absolutely.
Now, obviously, the 2 Philly games in the final 3 weeks could be key to the division. But if you're talking about a possible wild card, well, 5 NFC games to finish it out means you're going to be able to, make hay within the conference by conference tiebreakers to try to make a late run. And I think the other really big thing, and there are a bunch of things, again, I put the whole list on my Twitter at GiantsWFAN, positives and negatives. But the other big one for me was Miami and Buffalo are both in mid-October. Buffalo, you don't want to go there in December.
Yeah.
You don't want to go to Miami in September when it's 95 degrees.
Though it'll still, I'm sure, be mild in Miami in the early stages of October. It's not
But
that
to
late.
be frank, they did mitigate some of the dramatic weather you might have faced by having both of those games in October.
Sure. Yeah, no, there's no doubt about it. I mean, and once again, it's not as if the majority of the players are also not used to being in cold weather, even if they had to play Buffalo later on the season. For example, Paul, they're going to New England on November 26th. I mean, New England's a wild card. You don't know what the weather's going to be like around that time of the year. So I never really equated the weather into being a huge
Buffalo
challenge.
tends to be a little bit more disastrous, though. Just last year, we heard of a 6-foot snowstorm that hit Buffalo.
Of course, but I mean, hey,
Okay,
you get New England snow in November, though. I mean, that's not out of the line.
You can, but I don't think you're getting the 6 feet that you got in
No,
Buffalo
you may not,
last
but what
year.
I'm saying is whether it's 6 feet or it's 2 inches, snow is snow, and you still got to play through it, is the point. And wind
Well,
and so forth and all those factors.
yeah, but there are
So-
logistics of trying to get to the game. There's logistics of maybe even the game being canceled or moved. And then
Well,
there's
but-
logistics of trying to get home after the game.
100%.
This isn't just about field conditions. This is also about the trip itself.
And I get that. I'm looking at it more through the lens of just the field conditions.
Well,
'Cause
you're
at the end of the
entitled to
day-
do so.
Well,
I look at big picture.
No, I get it, but there are professionals that work for all of these NFL teams that have navigated far more bigger challenges. Remember, it wasn't too long ago. The Giants, they had a game in Minnesota, and the roof collapsed, if you remember.
Yeah.
So they had to move that game on the fly
That
within a day or two.
was not a fun situation.
I'm not saying it was fun, but what I'm saying is the NFL has a lot of history in moving and tweaking games if necessary.
They can. Hey, look, they battled through a pandemic.
That's what I'm saying.
We had a whole
Yeah.
season
So-
through a pandemic. So that's great. I'm talking about, I will always look at the schedule with the general manager and the coach's mentality. Okay? How will these logistics potentially impact the chances of my team to succeed? That's what Parcells taught me to do that years ago. That's why Bill would always say, I want Sunday at 1 o'clock. Bill was religious about that. I want Sunday 1. That's like Sunday Mass. Sunday 1 o'clock, that's when I want to kick off.
Well, because it's convenient, sure.
Yeah, but he wasn't going to get that because the Giants were good. So they had a lot of doubleheader games in those days, where they were the 4 o'clock game. So that was not going to happen. But Parcells is the one who taught me that you look at the schedule and you're looking for all the little idiosyncrasies that could logistically cause either travel issues or fatigue issues, or for that matter, although it's a lot easier now because they got all the videotapes of the games. They're literally, while they're getting on the plane, they got them on a little chip in the computers, and the coaches are already breaking down the games while they're flying back. In those days, it was a little bit harder.
Well, the technology is different, sure.
The technology has kind of helped that a little bit. But there are logistical things that will definitely rattle coaches and will rattle GMs and like, oh man, they really did us wrong on this. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking from the fans' perspective. I'm not looking for the sideline guy's perspective, whether it's me or Howard Cross. I'm not even looking at it from the player's perspective like you are. I'm looking at it, if I'm football operations, how could this schedule logistically throw a monkey wrench into what I'm trying to do? That's what I do.
Well, but I'm sure the GM and the front office is also making sure that the field conditions will be ideal for the game. That's why, to me, it's a bigger issue about is it snowing on the field as opposed to is it snowing the day before and how do they get to the game. That, I think, can be navigated.
So you don't travel. If you travel
I
to
travel
the games,
to other games, though it may not be these games. I do a lot of traveling. Trust me, Paul.
Okay,
I understand that there's could be headaches.
Yeah, being with the team traveling party, yeah, there are significant, like when the Giants had to go to Minnesota last year. All right, I'm not gonna. It was -5 when the team party unboarded or deboarded the plane. Okay, that was not fun for anybody.
Well, I'm not saying anybody's signing up for that. Sure,
the ice that was on the metal stairs as we were trying to get off the plane to get down to the team buses. All you need is for one guy to slip on that ice and snap his ankle, and all of a sudden, guess what? The weather impacted that game, and it had nothing to do with the field.
Sure, but something tells me.
This stuff happens.
I understand that, but I don't think a GM and a head coach are stressing over the potential of the railing being slippery in the month of May about a game in December.
Not the railing.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'll be more politically correct. Excuse me. I'm not trying to make light of it, but
this is specific.
You're stressing over things that I think take it to a way extreme is my point. And you got there. Did you not get there okay?
Yeah.
Were you okay? Was the hotel room okay? Were you able to sleep well at night?
And actually, you know the funny
Were
part?
the pillows
we go
fluffed
back
enough for
there.
you?
We go back there for the playoff game, and the weather was better for the playoff game than it was for the regular season.
So now
game.
your viewpoint of Minnesota is a lot better. Is that right? You have no beef with the Minnesota people and the natives?
Not after that victory,
okay,
no.
So I'm glad. That we were concerned. We were overly concerned because of all our Minnesota viewers and listeners. So I'm glad that there's no bad blood to get through. In terms of other takeaways from the schedule, we talked about the road trips. The other thing that's prominent is the fact that they have 4 primetime games in their first 6 contests.
Right.
So there is going to be, to your point, which you were talking about, Bill Parcells wants to play at 1 o'clock on every Sunday. And by the way, I completely support when you work for the team from a broadcasting perspective. I'm all for early starts.
Okay.
Early starts, early finishes. But in all seriousness, they do have a lot of primetime games, which means, it's going to be an adjustment with respect to the schedule because there's going to be quicker turnarounds, at least getting back to the facility, preparing for the next game. Then in the second half of the season, it's only 1 primetime game against the Packers Monday night, and you do have a few 4 o'clock games, but we expected the 4 o'clock games because of the fact that they are taking West Coast trips, and those games are not going to start at 1. For example, they're playing the Raiders at 4:25, and we've had Cowboys games because it's the game of the week at 4:25. Now, the Philadelphia game is on Christmas, so, that's why it's a bit of a late start. That's unusual, but I guarantee you, if they were playing perhaps Philadelphia on a normal Sunday, yes, it could have been prime time, but given the volume of games, that could have very well been a 1 o'clock game. The Giants have played the Eagles at 1 o'clock. That's not out of the usual scheduling that we've seen in previous years.
Only 7 of the Giants' 17 games are Sunday at 1 o'clock. 7 out of 17.
And normally we see a little bit higher with respect to that. Yeah.
10 or so.
Yep.
But only 7 out of 17. And to be honest, the last game against Philadelphia is actually a flex game right now, as it stands.
Yep.
Because that's part of the NFL's scheduling formula, which says the last weekend of the regular season, we can bump you to Saturday. And not only Saturday, there's a primetime game on Saturday, too. I mean, it's entirely possible that the Giants and Eagles, that last weekend of the regular season, could wind up being Saturday night. So that
or
would
it
give
could be
the Giants
Sunday later in the day, too.
Later, but it can't be night. I don't believe they don't want to play Sunday night, I don't think,
no,
this
that's
year.
not. It can't be the case. The Packers and the Lions played. They are Sunday night football.
This year.
Really?
Check the schedule this year.
Okay, no, you may be correct. I didn't hear that. That may have went over my head. I didn't realize.
I'm not sure.
Why would they not want a primetime game Sunday night?
I'm not sure.
Okay. Once again, you may be right. I didn't hear that. So
I think what I was told is that the Giants-Eagles would not go to Sunday night. It would go to Saturday night if they moved the game.
You mean they designated? You're telling me certain
Well,
games
no, just the odds. Someone in the TV, not with the Giants or the NFL.
I hear you. Yeah.
Someone with a TV background said to me, if the Giants-Eagles came out to be a division championship game, don't be shocked if they bump it to Saturday night.
No, and I get that, but what I don't understand is why would Sunday night not be in play, given the fact that
I don't know.
They always want that Sunday night game to be meaningful, remember, for both teams. And the Lions and Packers, unfortunately, it didn't work out that way because Seattle had won and knocked out the Lions.
What is the
so
game?
It was a playing game
what
for
is
the Packers.
The game as it is now that weekend?
They don't. They never have a designated primetime game. The final week of the season we're talking about, remember, they always wait. Those games are always TBA because they have to wait and see what's meaningful. So, I mean, it's possible, once again, that game could be moved to a Saturday.
They kept
but
it as TBA.
Everything's TBA, final week. They never know in advance because they're always waiting. So that's why I didn't know that there were any rules. But what I was going to get
to... there is no rule on that. I was just told to probably be ready for it.
Be ready? Okay. Hey. Perhaps
that's a TV guy telling me that.
No,
now.
Listen, if the TV executives want to speculate themselves.
Here's the problem.
I didn't know that.
The TV people run a lot of things.
No, of course they do, but
problem.
I never heard of the chances of it being Saturday versus Sunday night at this point before the schedule even starts would be so high from that standpoint. What I did want to say is you were bringing in the flex play. Now, there are two things to notice about this year's schedule. Whether they relate to the Giants or not remains to be seen. Monday night games can be flexed this year, starting in week 13.
Yes.
So that means that Giants-Packers game is in play. That would apply to the flex rule.
Yes.
So that also would be, now, once again, I'm not saying that it is going to, but it's possible the Giants could be one of those teams impacted where a Monday game goes to a Sunday or vice versa.
Yes.
You're scheduled to play on Sunday, you get moved to Monday. So that's something new. We've never experienced that before. The other thing that's new, before I get your commentary on this, is multiple teams are playing multiple Thursday night games, which we never saw before. Now, the Giants were not impacted by that.
Correct.
But you have the Bears, the Saints, and the Steelers are each playing twice on Thursday Night Football. Interestingly, Paul, I don't know if you noticed this. I was talking about this on SiriusXM NFL Radio. Pittsburgh got 2 home games in that scenario on Thursday night.
Okay.
Whereas the Bears and the Saints, they got split, home and road.
Okay.
Now, we talk about this all the time. The road team is always at a disadvantage on Thursday nights, right? Okay.
Always.
So for Pittsburgh to get 2 home games, that is a huge advantage. Now,
Didn't even look at that.
Now, I did an interview with one of the 6 league executives who puts the schedule together. Now, that was a computer thing. That was not one of those things where Pittsburgh said, all right, we'll play twice on Thursday, but it has to be home. That was just the product. Remember, they put all of these calculations into a computer. They get different versions, 5, 6 different versions. They bring them to the commissioner and they talk things out, and then they settle on the final schedule. But I know there's a lot of conspiracy theorists. That's why I bring this up. This wasn't one of those things like, okay, let's favor the Steelers. No, because there's a lot of people out there, Paul, that think they had it against my team. That's why they wanted to put them in a precarious spot. There's going to be disadvantages. That's the nature of how the computer sometimes tallies things up.
Okay.
So I just wanted to throw that out there because that's also something we've never experienced before. But the Monday night flex could very well affect the Giants because they do have a late season Monday night game. And remember, the Packers were given a lot of primetime games, but we don't know what's going to happen with Green Bay with Aaron Rodgers not there for the first time.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Giants' final month or so of the season, and to me, that last game against Philly is the only one that I think could get flexed into primetime. I don't think there's anything else there that has a really good chance of getting bumped.
Well, I'm only bringing up, once again, the Giants-Packers game, and I'm not saying bumped meaning to primetime. I'm talking about the reversal. You could see a situation where a game gets bumped out of primetime.
Well, the Packers may not be very good.
And that's my point. They may, because remember, Broncos-Chiefs late last year was one of those games, right? If we were having this conversation at this time about Broncos-Chiefs late in the season, what are we thinking? Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes?
Not me.
Good
I
chance.
thought Wilson was done.
Okay. Well, you were in the minority. Congratulations. We will pat you on the back
Thank you
for that.
very much.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
I was talking about from a generic sense. Okay. You can see, ladies and gentlemen, we're also getting Paul's takes a year in advance of what he thought. Okay. That was a big part of the dialogue today. But anyway, getting back to the point at hand. Denver, Kansas City. I think most people would have said that's going to be a very attractive game later in the season. And it wound up getting bumped. So we could see a situation like that. Now, I would argue there's pros and cons, Paul, whether a game goes from a Sunday to a Monday or Monday to a Sunday. I don't know if there's a huge advantage because if you're playing on Sunday and you're told by the league, and by the way, the league gives teams about a 5 or a 6 week heads up. They may not announce it until 2 weeks prior, but they're having conversations behind back doors.
They tell them you may be in this boat.
Exactly. So the reason I want to preface that is because I think the common narrative is, man, that's tough for a team to find out 2 weeks in advance they get moved from Sunday to Monday.
They have an inkling that they could be moved.
Correct. Okay.
That's true.
So I want to make that clear. But you could look at it two ways. You get moved Sunday to Monday. Okay, now you have a quick turnaround, right? The back end the following week, right? Because you're going from Monday to a shortened week.
Okay.
And then if you're going from a Monday game to a Sunday game, now maybe your prep work gets cut a little bit, right? Because you thought maybe you'd have the extra day. Either way, there's pros and cons. My point is, I don't look at it as you're really putting a team one way or the other in a detrimental position.
Well, you are if you're forcing them to take a long flight back on Monday night.
Well, sure, but
that's very detrimental.
Okay, that's fair, but it's going to be a short turnaround no matter how you look at it, whether it's a short flight or a long flight. My point is you're going to get a quick turnaround if you play then on the following Sunday.
In terms of days, yes. But, for example, and this happens very often with the Giants, I can only speak firsthand. When you come back from a late-night primetime game, very often those players aren't going to practice for at least 2 days. All right? They'll get Monday off.
Yep.
They'll be told to come in late Monday after. Let's say it's a Monday night. Forget Sunday.
Yeah, if you're going to play Monday night, you're not coming in Monday.
Let's say it's a Monday night primetime game, and you're coming back from Dallas, let's just say. All right? There's a real possibility that those players are not coming in until meetings at like 3 o'clock or 3:30 in the afternoon on Monday.
On Tuesday, you mean?
On Tuesday.
We're talking about Monday night game. Okay.
Monday night game, on Tuesday.
Yeah.
And then on Wednesday, they're probably not coming in until late, and they're only doing a walkthrough.
Well, and you're also starting to introduce the next opponent though, on Wednesday as well.
And you're trying to get that stuff going.
Yeah.
And you probably have one practice. In all honesty, one really good practice because of the way that it works out. So what you're hoping for, if you've got a primetime game, is that you have an easy logistical road trip. In other words, if you're the Giants, you want to be playing Washington. You want to be playing the Jets. You want to be playing Buffalo, Miami, Carolina, Pittsburgh. Anything that's really somewhat on the Eastern Seaboard and hopefully Mid-Atlantic and North. Because it's a much easier schedule to navigate on the back end of the night game, okay? Once you add that extra 2 or 3 hours of travel time, it's like, no, we've got to get those players to recover. We got to get them some sleep. We got to get them some downtime.
Yep.
And it just backs everything up. So it does become a big problem unless it's either a home game or it's a very close road game. Those primetime games are a hassle.
No, there's no doubt about it. But, I mean, once again, you're playing on Monday night. To me, no matter where you're traveling, Tuesday is shot regardless because you're going to make sure that the players get some sleep anyway in terms of coming back. I would think that holds true for just about every team. But to apply your logic, New Orleans, Philadelphia, Los Angeles would be those 3 other games that would be in play. Well, actually, no, I'll remove the Philadelphia game. They're playing on Christmas. They're not moving that game.
That's not moving at all.
New Orleans or L.A. are the only other 2 games that could get moved Sunday to
doubt
Monday.
It.
Well, it could be slim, but here's the bottom line. You play the Rams at home anyway, so you're not going to Los Angeles.
Right.
And New Orleans is not an overwhelming flight.
And I don't think the game on the 31st is going to be flexed anyway. That is New Year's weekend.
Well, there is a Monday night game, though, that week. So that's why I'm keeping that in play, because as long as there's a Monday night game on the schedule, Paul, anything could happen.
That's true.
Remember, weeks 13 through week 17, those are in play.
That's true.
But I agree with you. I would say Green Bay, the Giants, which is already on Monday night, is the only game that could be changed. But in that case, they'd be moved out of it. They wouldn't be moved in it because they're already scheduled. So few little tidbits and takeaways, big picture perspective in terms of what the schedule presents. And in terms of the road trips, you have 3 pairs of back-to-back road games and 1 3-straight road trip in terms of Las Vegas, Dallas, and Washington. And a number of teams, by the way, if you monitor the schedule, have 3 straight road games. The Giants are not the only team in that boat, but that's not a high volume compared to what we saw last year. 201-939-4513. That is the telephone number. You can also hit us up, hashtag Giants Chat. Free reminders before we open up the phone lines. Giants Huddle Podcast. You can check that out on your favorite podcast platform, or you go to giants.com/podcast. As we look ahead to the 2023 season, Giants fans, take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more, about all the exclusive member benefits. Visit Giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And the Giants official connected TV streaming app is Giants TV. It brings you original video content, game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the lines. We've got Tom in Stratford. He joins us here on BBKL. What's happening, Tom? What do you got for us?
Happy Monday, guys.
Same to you.
Hi.
A couple of quick things. I don't understand why everyone is talking about flying back from Vegas, coming to New York, and then flying back to Dallas. I think it would make more sense just to stay out there because that's a long flight.
Yeah, but that's a full week, though. But that's also a full week.
That's okay.
So
it's not a bad place to spend time.
But Dallas is also not an overwhelming trip, too. I mean, if it was Las Vegas, Arizona, I think you have a stronger case for that as opposed to Las Vegas, come back, you're at your own facility, you use your rooms, your practice fields, and then Saturday late you head to Dallas. I don't think there's a huge disadvantage to that.
Yeah,
Okay.
being part of the traveling party, I can tell you that the Dallas trip is not regarded as, quote, a West Coast trip.
Yeah.
You got to go out further than that before you start making adjustments.
Okay. Well, do they ever ask the players what they would prefer?
No, it's about the coaching. Every coaching staff has a different feel on this. Dan Reeves used to go out to the West Coast 2 days before. So for a Sunday game, he would take the traveling party out on Friday. Every other coach that I have known believes that you keep your regular travel schedule. You go out the day before the game. Coach Reeves thought otherwise. But again, he coached in Denver for quite a long time before he came to the Giants.
Yep.
So he just had a different take on it.
Right.
But normally, to answer your question, they don't take a poll amongst all the players and ask them, okay, raise your hand if you want to stay over. They don't normally do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, one real quick. Also, there was an article today in the New Jersey newspaper about the Giants offering Saquon. I think it was 3 years. First, it was at 12.5, and then they bumped it up to 13 with possible incentives bringing up to 14. Now, obviously, I don't know if that's true or not. But if it is true and he turned that down, he needs a new agent, really.
Well, Tom, here's why. Tom, let me just jump in here.
Giants, I'm not signing him right before this season because you don't know if he's going to last the whole season.
Well, Tom, let me just jump in here, and we don't know the validity of any of those reports, but I think you got to look at it from a different perspective, and we've had a lot of people saying, he needs new representation, he should have taken the deal back at the deadline last year. The bottom line is if you're Saquon, you got to look at it from this perspective, Tom. You're guaranteed the franchise tag. The franchise tag is fully guaranteed once you sign it. So if there's a chance you get a franchise tag 2 years in a row, you and your agent are probably doing the math. Well, what's 2 franchise tags put together? Meaning that you want guaranteed money in that ballpark. Do you understand? So when you read a report about what a team offers a player, you're not seeing the guaranteed aspect of that contract. So it's very hard to make an assumption that a player is making a bad decision or a good decision if you don't know the full breakdown of the deal. That full contract is not guaranteed. So they're not looking at it through that lens. You're assuming the $14 million is fully guaranteed. That's not how the contract works.
You're right. I didn't think of it from that perspective. So thanks for pointing that out.
No, not a problem.
Also, two other things real fast. Hey, Paul, do you remember someone holding up a sign in the 81 draft saying, "Let Odd be your guard"? I've been meaning to ask you this for weeks now.
Sure.
You do remember that? Okay, I thought I was the only one. Good. And also, Lance, does BBK ever go off the air during the off season? Because I'm really come to depend on the show.
No. I mean, the only time we don't do a show is if the facility for some reason is closed or whatever it may be. I mean, we're a year-round show.
Right.
Yeah, we've been year-round for last few years.
Usually during the summertime, right before camp, the office will be closed on like 4 consecutive Fridays. So
but we may still have a show. We may have a tape show. We don't know yet.
We may have a tape show. We may not have a live show. We may have a tape show. But there are isolated instances where we're not.
But Tom, to answer your question, you can rely on this show 24/7, pretty much year round. Yep.
Excellent. Because Giants TV is the first channel I turn on when I come home.
We certainly would echo those sentiments. We have no complaints with that. We like your choice in terms of what you like to review and take in, and appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring here. Yeah, we've been like that pretty much for the last few years. It's truly actually amazing. Speaking of reminiscing, the caller was asking about the 81 draft. I mean, where this show started to what it's become is truly amazing when you think about it.
I know.
And it's also a reflection of the NFL offseason. There is no time off. In terms of the league, there's an event. You and I have these conversations. They do a great job from a marketing standpoint, spreading everything out. Let's head back to the phone lines. We got Wilson in Roxbury joining us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live, and we know Wilson probably has some conspiracy theorist up his sleeve that he's dying to let us know.
He always does.
Yeah, I mean, come on. Yeah, I mean, I'm surprised the previous caller referenced the article. We leave that for Wilson. Wilson does the reading. He listens to sports talk and then throws it back at us to try to make sense of it. So, Wilson, we're dying to know what you were listening to and what you were reading over the course of the weekend. Yes.
No, listen. Hey, first thing, hope you guys are doing good, both of you guys.
Well, we're doing okay, but then again, ask us after your phone call. Then we'll truly know how we're doing. But go ahead, yes.
All right, so listen. So now that we digested the draft and everything, I have a few crazy statements and a couple of crazy predictions. Here we go. My first crazy statement is this. You can't call the first game of the season a must-win. Against Dallas on Sunday night, it's a must-win. We're sick and tired of losing to the Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles anyway. But listen, if they win that game, it can propel the season. But if they lose that game, and if they lose at bad guys, it can really derail the season. I believe that, and a lot of my Giants buddies, we all believe that. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I completely disagree with it on many different levels. I don't know if there's enough time on the remainder of this show, Wilson, for me to fully counter that. Well, here's why I disagree with it. See, if you were to come out and you were to say that you have to have a winning record in your divisional play games, I would say I absolutely agree with you. Because, right, Paul, look at the record against the division foes last year. Even though the Giants made the playoffs, it still put them in a very tough position. Yeah, but so then how do you make the claim that if they, God forbid, lose to Dallas, that you don't have then 5 more opportunities to help balance the scales? That's my point.
Right.
No. I'm just saying that because, like I said, it's crazy to say that it's a must-win in the first game of the season. But I really do believe that it's a must-win. I really do believe that if they win that game, the whole season, they have a different outlook altogether.
But why? But why do they have a different outlook? So they can't focus on Arizona the following week if they lose to Dallas? That's your argument? Brian Dable and company will not be able to rally and get focused on the next opponent?
Wilson, let me make something clear to you, okay? Even if you want to be a pessimist and say they lose to Dallas,
no, I'm not.
They could easily beat the Cardinals, the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Dolphins and be 4-1 going up to Buffalo. Now, you wouldn't sign up for that today if you had the opportunity to?
Of course I would.
Sure you would.
Of course I would.
But that also includes the loss to Dallas that you just said is Chicken Little, the sky is falling.
Well, it's because,
come on.
I guess, Paul, because as a fan, it's going to be Sunday night. It's gonna be national television, and they lose against Dallas. You know what's gonna happen the next Monday? Oh my God! The same old Giants.
See, there you go. Reading the papers, listening to the sport. He's worried. See, Wilson's not worried about the game, Paul. Wilson is worried about
the hype.
Local media is going to be
said.
He's preparing for the narratives that people are going to be talking about 4 to 5 months from now. And I thought you stressed out about things. Wilson may actually take the cake from you.
You know, Wilson, for what it's worth, okay, the Giants are 23-31-1, okay, in career games on Sunday Night Football, okay? They're under 500, all right?
Okay.
So if you want to stress from now till kickoff against the Cowboys,
I'm not.
Focus on that record and stress about how they might lose the game, okay? I'm just trying to help you stress out. That's all.
No, I don't want to stress out. That's why I called you guys so we can all stress out together.
Well, you're still in your own boat, okay? Let's make that clear. I'm not stressing about anything at this point.
All right, what else you got, my man?
What
else you got?
What other things can we work out here?
So listen, and to me, I don't consider going to Buffalo and in New England like really road games. I mean, they're road games in the word road because you're on the road, but to go into Buffalo and to New England,
right?
When you can drive for hours, it's not like, oh my God, you should be fine. I wouldn't call that like
those are
games.
not
like
logistical nightmares. No, logistically, those are rather easy trips to make. That's true.
Okay,
go ahead.
And my last thing, right? Because and I'm gonna quote the great Al Pacino on this, Paulie. it's a joke that the Jets have the 6th best odds to win the Super Bowl. It's insulting to Giants fans. Not only that,
There we go again.
you know. Well,
Now at least you're an equal opportunist. Now we're going after Vegas. We went after the local media. Now we're transitioning to Vegas. Please, yes. What's the beef with Vegas?
We're gonna play the Jets. Because we're gonna play the Jets, right? And everybody, it's a great defense. You know what? The Jets defense is? It's a fugazi defense. They can never get a stop when they need to get a stop.
They were pretty good last year.
Wilson, hold on a second now. You can't go ripping apart the Jets defense because they're probably one of the top 5 in the league. Now, what you can do, you can mock people for having this tremendous confidence in a 39-year-plus old quarterback who is going to be behind a suspect offensive line, who does have some injuries in his history, and right now has a suspect running game. Okay? So if you want to tell me that Aaron Rodgers may not even make it to the Giants game because he's going to get battered behind that offensive line and the Jets season will burn into shambles, you can tell me that. But don't tell me it's because their defense is a fraud. That's not going to hold water here.
Paulie, listen, I'm praying to God. No. When we play the Jets, I want Aaron Rodgers to play that game. Otherwise, you got to hear this Jets fans, oh, you beat us with no quarterback. No. Please let him be healthy till that day.
Okay.
Well, I don't think we're not wishing injury to anybody.
Nobody's wishing anybody to get hurt.
Yeah. No,
Wilson, thanks for the call, Wilson.
We appreciate it, Wilson.
201-939-4513. We never want anyone to get hurt. But just to make this very, very clear, the Jets are banking everything on Aaron Rodgers to get to the Super Bowl. He is nearly 40 years old. He is not as mobile as he used to be. He has had injury history, okay? And by the way, a number of different body parts, not just one. He's had 2 concussions. He's got an offensive line that is suspect at best. And Bryce Hall, I know they're talking about maybe he's got a chance to get back early September. That's not a very reliable running game right now because you don't know what he's going to bring to the table. Sure. So Rodgers is going to have a lot of pressure on him, and he's probably going to take a pounding in the first half of the season.
We'll see. I mean, time will tell whether or not that offensive line, which, by the way, I think struggled last year because of the injuries. Remember, they didn't have everybody at their disposal. Doubt. Elijah Vera-Tucker was sidelined. Mekhi Becton didn't play. So they're going to get some guys back. We'll see whether or not that comes to fruition. There's no doubt about it. The Jets' offense has question marks, whether Aaron Rodgers is there or not. But their defense was extremely consistent last year. Mm-hmm. You know, they lost their final 6 games, but look at what the opponent scored. Minnesota 27, Buffalo 20, Detroit 20, Jacksonville 19, Seattle 23, Miami 11. You remove that Minnesota game, they held their last 5 opponents to 23 points or less. You're putting your team in a position to win those games.
No doubt.
So let's give the defense a pat on the back here because they do deserve it. That was one of the most consistent units in football
and
last
there's
year.
No reason why they won't be a top 5 defense.
Well, the core is coming back for the most part.
So I'm with you there. I just have doubts about Rodgers.
No, and listen, on top of that, Denver had a good defense last year. They brought in Russell Wilson, and look what happened there. Mm-hmm. Nothing is guaranteed in the NFL. Winning the offseason does not lead to automatic wins, okay?
But
we don't need the Broncos or the Jets to use that as an example.
Vegas is a very emotionally filled entity. And so I do think a lot of these odds makers are giving the Jets fans reason for hope, reason for them to be a contender. And, okay, let's assume Aaron Rodgers is the MVP type Aaron Rodgers that we've seen before. Hey, if he is healthy and plays that well again, okay, absolutely the Jets have a chance to go far. That's absolutely true. But would I want to bank on Rodgers being that guy under these circumstances at this point in time? Personally, I would not. I think that's a very big question mark. Look, they thought Favre was going to do the same thing for them. And what happened? Well, and they were on their way, and then he got hurt.
They had a very good start. I think they were like 8-3, and then all of a sudden lost.
He got hurt.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. He got a shoulder injury, and that's what brought his play down.
And by the way, he was more of an Iron Man than Rodgers was.
Yes, because Brett had not missed a game due to injury. Aaron has missed games due to injury. Yeah, Aaron has held up in recent history. I'll give you that. I mean, he's a tough guy, but yeah, you can't guarantee that a guy up there in age who all of a sudden is nearing 20 seasons in the league, anything could happen. And remember, the Jets have some question marks in terms of their depth chart, too, at quarterback. Remember, that was the Packers' problem. When Aaron would go down, there wasn't anyone that could at least keep
Is there any doubt that
keel.
if Rodgers goes down, that ship goes down with him?
Well,
come on.
Take a massive hit. Well, but there are some teams that have maybe a good veteran quarterback.
They're not.
Well, you've got Zach Wilson with question marks. They brought in Tim Boyle, who actually backed up Aaron in Green Bay. Yes, that's why there's definitely some question marks. But that defense, that's not the place to criticize or question the Jets.
No,
if anything,
not at
it's
all.
on the opposite side of the ball. And as far as the Vegas odds, I don't know off the top of my head, but I'm sure the odds were high for the Denver Broncos at this time last year too, right? Probably Vegas was thinking the Broncos were going to be, at least at worst, a wild card team.
Push the emotions as much as you can and try to get the betting public to sucker in.
Yeah, well,
that's what they do.
Listen, I don't know about you. I don't put a lot of stock behind Vegas odds.
No,
Remember, the
nor do
money
I.
also that is being bet on a specific team shifts the balance of the odds. Okay, let's not forget about that. We don't need to go into a gambling lesson, but that's another reason why gambling should not dictate or tell you how you think a game is going to be played.
Nor should fantasy football.
The Jets haven't played a snap yet.
Exactly.
With Aaron Rodgers.
Well, I mean, look, welcome to the NFL
Pearson.
offseason,
Thank
Pearson.
you.
Welcome to the NFL offseason.
Because, by the way, when you play real football, you get hurt.
The other thing I wanted to bring up, by the way, with respect to Week 1 being a must-win situation against a divisional foe, I was just perusing some of the teams that made the playoffs. Cincinnati Bengals, okay? They play the Pittsburgh Steelers last year in Week 1, and Joe Burrow had probably the worst game of his entire season. He had, I think, 4 or 5 interceptions, and balls were being deflected, and you had an extra point block towards the end. They wound up losing that game.
The Bengals were being thought of as dead after that game. Remember?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, my God, what happened to the Bengals of the previous year? They just fell off the map. Somehow that did not happen.
Now, and in fairness, they wound up losing to the Cowboys in another close game the following week. But last time I checked, the Bengals did regroup, and they ultimately made the playoffs.
Yes, they did.
So I wanted an example of a team because I know a lot of people will point to, and I'm sure if you look at the archives, right, they always throw this out. Teams that start 0-1 or 0-2, right, the chances of them making the playoffs dip. Sure. And there's validity behind that, but that doesn't mean it holds true across the board.
Well,
that's my point.
Facts are facts. That's true. Facts are facts. But as they tell you in the stock market, history does not always repeat itself. It may be an indicator of what might happen, but there's no guarantee that it will happen again.
Yeah, and that's why, with respect to divisional games, and I brought this up immediately with one of our most recent callers, after the season's over, you need to look at the divisional record because more often than not, that's an indication of whether or not you're going to have a good chance to get to the playoffs or most important, win the division. And we always talk about you've got to be minimum 3-3 in the division. Ideally, you want to be 4-2. It's almost impossible to win the division at 3-3 too. We did this exercise, very few teams in the NFC East. So that to me is where you study the divisional games and you say, listen, if you want to win the division, you've got to handle your business in the division. But you drop Week 1 against a divisional foe, it doesn't dictate and determine the chances of whether or not you can regroup.
I said to Howard on Friday, the Giants cannot expect to win one game in the NFC East as they did last year and think they're going back to the playoffs.
And that's my point exactly.
However, Howard did come back and say, well, now that there are 17 games
and
there's an extra game
sure.
out of the division, your percentages of potentially pulling that off are increased. Well, maybe they are increased, but they're still not very good.
No, and I'm with Howard because I've brought up that point too. The math is different now. It's 11-6 as opposed to 10-6. So you put a little bit more weight. But here's what I would bring up to Howard, and I'm sure you may have discussed this. It's about the tiebreakers, Paul. Okay? That's where it comes back to haunt you. And NFC games and divisional games are weighted higher than that extra game that he's talking about, which is against an AFC opponent. So that's why it could really come back and influence the mathematics.
I recall last year when the Giants settled for that tie against Washington at home. I tried to tell people the next day when so many were Chicken Little, the sky is falling. I was trying to tell people then, based on the way that the standings were breaking out, this will help the Giants in a tiebreaker. Trust me, this tie was very fruitful, very positive, and very good for the Giants. Much better for the Giants than it was for Washington. As it played out, that tie is the reason the Giants made the playoffs. By the time the season was over, and all the smoke had cleared, and you saw the final regular season standings, had the Giants lost that game instead of tied, they would have been left out. They would not have made it. That tie was the difference between them being a postseason team and not. Okay? You have to understand how the standings are breaking out, who the tie is against, how it affects the tiebreakers, and especially because it was involved in the conference and with a team that was going to be in the race, all right? When you looked at that Seattle game where the Giants lost and everybody said, oh my God, that's going to kill the Giants. No, in reality, the Giants, because of the tie with Washington, put Washington on the outside looking in and wound up making it.
Well, because they had half a win and half a loss, whereas Seattle didn't have that in play. But I'm talking about at the time of the Seahawks game, it's a completely different conversation because you figure it's going to get to a point where common opponents or NFC opponents could come into the mathematical equation.
Well, there's no doubt that Seattle was in the mix there. That's true. But my point was, regarding Washington, that tie was always going to be a positive for the Giants. I knew from the second that game was over, this will be a positive. I told people on Twitter, I told people on the show all week, and there were people crying in their soup. Oh my God, this tie is going to hurt the Giants. No, it was a positive. All you had to do was look at the combination of teams who were in the race to understand that that tie was going to benefit the Giants. And it did.
The lesson learned here, though, big picture perspective, is NFC games, divisional games, hold much more weight than anything else on your schedule. And that's why you do want to prioritize, of course, winning in your division, but you could lose your first divisional game and then win your next 5, and you still finish 5-1 in the division. So how are we going crazy to say it's the most important game on the schedule? And I know players and coaches always tell you the next game is the most important, and that's because they need the mindset of staying focused.
To be that way.
I get that, but the bottom line is there have been teams that have struggled early on in a season and have regrouped. Look at the Lions, for example. Detroit started off 1-6 last year. Now, they missed the playoffs, but they actually almost had a meaningful game in Week 18, right? Because of the 8-2 finish that they had. So I'm not saying that everyone should subscribe to a 1-6 start and feel good, but there's a reason why there's two halves to the season.
Let me ask you a question. I asked the folks on Twitter this morning, and 201-939-4513 is our phone number. Which of the 17 games is the most intriguing to you, or maybe the one that you most look forward to seeing over the course of this upcoming season? Is there one in particular that kind of gets your fancy a little bit?
Well, I'll never answer divisional games because they play them twice a year every single year.
That's fine.
So I always eliminate that.
That's fine.
Yeah, that's why I always look at games outside of the division. I would probably say the Buffalo game is a bit intriguing because of the Brian Daboll, Joe Shane
That's
connection.
my game.
And it's on primetime.
That's my game.
That, to me, I think would probably top the list.
The Buffalo game immediately when we knew that we were going to play them because of the rotation, we knew it was going to happen.
Yep.
It was like, okay, because of the Buffalo connection, we're probably going to get them in primetime. I felt all along that was going to be a primetime game, and we knew it was going to be in Buffalo. So the idea was hopefully the weather will be decent. Okay, that's the game that I immediately circled. Yeah. Among all the non-divisional opponents. I mean, it's always fun to play the Patriots anyway because of the history.
Yeah,
but let's face it, the Buffalo game is the one that's got the juice.
Oh, and plus you got Josh Allen. You have a team that has been in the playoff conversation over the last few years.
The storylines are incredible.
Exactly.
And the mind games, the chess match that we're going to see between those coaches that week. It's going to be
because Sean McDermott knows Dable. Dable knows Sean McDermott. There's a lot of carryover.
It's going to be unbelievable.
Knows Joe Shane.
And every single play of that game will be dissected as if it was a mastermind trying to outdo the other guy on the chessboard.
Well, remember, it reminds me of, if you recall, when Baltimore came to MetLife Stadium this past season, and the big storyline was how much does Wink know about them? How much do they know about Wink? And that was a highly contested game.
No question.
You had a big takeaway late in the game that ultimately dictated it. So no reason to think that Buffalo can't play at least into the same storyline. Also, putting aside those connections, I think you also need to look at it through the lens of it's not too late in the season, and Buffalo, assuming everybody stays healthy on the Bills, is going to be a pretty good litmus test for the Giants.
Doubt.
So those factors, I think, make it an attractive game as well.
No doubt. And so, it's ironic that I would not say the Jets because a lot of people would immediately say the Jets. Giants-Jets regular season game, okay, great. No, for me, it's Buffalo for all the reasons we just discussed. And to be honest with you, the The one that kind of I circle as, boy, I really wish that they didn't have to play them, is the game in New Orleans, because the Superdome has been a house of horrors for the Giants forever.
And
there have
Derek
been
Carr.
some miserable games there, and Carr can wing it.
Yeah, well, that's
Okay.
what I'm saying. They got now some stability under center.
For years, Breeze was doing damage to the Giants in that building, and now they got Carr, and he's going to wing it too. So that's a game I wish I could erase from the schedule.
No, but New Orleans is another game, to your point, that perhaps has some intrigue because, once again, the trouble that the Giants have had, Derek Carr now being in the fold, they've got a pretty good defense. I think they're an underrated group that is maybe overlooked by most. So Buffalo, New Orleans is in the conversation. I think the Jets by default is appealing because of the New York-New Jersey rivalry aspect. So, I put that in the divisional grouping. That game is going to be something that everybody's going to talk about.
Right.
So that's why I removed that. And here's the thing. If I had a better idea of what the Niners quarterback situation was, I'd put that in the conversation too, because you're going on a quick turnaround. I know they're still going to be out on the West Coast, but still, it's still a quick turnaround. You have played a game on Sunday, and Kyle Shanahan's very creative. The Niners have had a pretty good track record against the Giants. They have a really good defense, but I don't know who's going to be the quarterback. Is it Trey Lance? Is it Brock Purdy? Is it someone else? So that's why I'd put that right behind Buffalo and New Orleans, if we're going to talk about maybe a top 3 list of games.
Okay.
Just wanted to throw that out there. I think we covered everything. With that being said, let's reopen up the phone lines at 201-939-4513. Manny, speaking of California, that's where he's located, and he joins us here on BBKL. What's happening, Manny?
Hey, nice to talk to you, Lance and Paul. Great
Hi.
coverage of the draft.
Thank you.
I'm probably the only person, Giant fan, that's thrilled with the schedule because I've got 3 road games that I can drive to.
There you go.
Very good.
But I did want to comment, Wilson gets bashed not quite as much as Charlie and probably not nearly as much deserved as Charlie. But I think beyond taking it one step further, I think what he really meant and what I would agree with, the game against Dallas, the opening game, is not a must-win game. But likening it to the Tennessee game last year, winning that game after our history of losing in the first game to Dallas repeatedly and not win our terrible record on Sunday nights could really jumpstart the season. Losing it doesn't do anything. And if you look at the 6 games, barring injury, barring the Eagles not playing anybody in Week 18, that's, other than the 2 Washington games, that's the most winnable game of the 6. And if we're going to get to at least 3-3, that's the game most likely to go our way. Sure, we could beat Dallas in Jonesville, and we might be able to pull one out, or Eagles might have scrubs in the last game, and we easily win that one. But if we're all playing on paper the way we are right now, that's the most likely 3rd win. Get your comment.
Well, you talk about the win against the Cowboys in the opener is the 3rd most likely win within the division, just so that I have that straight?
Yes. The 2 Washington games, I think, are the most winnable, and because it's a home game, that's the 3rd most winnable game of the 6, unless the Eagles aren't playing their starters in Week 18.
I suppose you're not totally out of line with your logic, because as I look at the division, I still think Philadelphia has the best 90-man roster as we sit here today in the NFC East. And it's hard for me to imagine. I'm not going to just give them a sweep over the Giants, but it's going to be awfully hard for the Giants to try to wrestle a victory away from them. I hope that when we get to those games, I can tell you that I think the Giants will win. Right now, I can't say that. And until that team gets knocked off its pedestal, they are the best team in the division. So they've got the best chance to sweep the Giants of any of the other teams. I don't think very much of the Commanders. I think they are easily the last place team in the division. And I do think the Giants have a better roster than the Cowboys. That's just my opinion. So I would tend to agree with you. You think split Dallas and sweep Washington. There are your 3 wins. I could understand the rationale behind that.
I mean, the bottom line is I don't see that big of a drop-off between the Eagles and the Cowboys. I think both of those teams still are bringing back the core of their rosters. I mean, if you want to give the Giants an edge because it's a home game, sure. But, I mean, it's certainly no picnic. And remember, the Giants haven't beaten the Cowboys with Dak Prescott as the starting quarterback since his rookie year in 2016. So a lot of time has gone by where they haven't been able to solve the Dallas riddle as much as they've struggled with solving the Philadelphia riddle. But, I mean, the breakdown is fair there, Manny. I mean, you could argue a home game against Dallas maybe being the third percentage-wise best chance. Absolutely. But you know how things play out in this division.
Yeah.
There's not much gimmies when it comes to the NFC East.
It's still really all about the timing and who's injured and who's not and who's playing who at that given matchup. You know how that goes.
Looks
He's
like
gone.
We lost many from that perspective. Okay. And the other thing is, too, with respect to the Tennessee comparison, I get it, the fact that the Giants had struggled in openers. So obviously it was nice to see them beat Tennessee. But I'm not a big believer that just because you win your first game, that now the pathway for success for the rest of the season is that much higher.
I understand the point about last year's Tennessee game because it was a new coaching staff. Dable was trying to build a mentality and a philosophy and a confidence and a respect factor. And when he went for the 2 to beat the Titans opening day, it established a very quick, crazy glue kind of bond between him and the players. And the Giants just took that and went sailing with it. So I agree. There was tremendous value in that opening day victory in Tennessee last year. Absolutely, I agree with that. I don't know that there would be the same value in beating Dallas this year because Dable is now in his second year as a coach. He's already established that bond. You don't necessarily need that rocket ship of confidence that you had in his first year, which, by the way, wasn't just his first year with the Giants. It was his first ever head coaching gig in the National Football League.
Yeah.
So there was a tremendous amount to gain by winning that game. Those circumstances are not here now. He's already been there, done that. You don't have to get that rocket ship of confidence and that rocket ship of trust and boost anymore. So while beating Dallas opening night would be great, it would not, in my opinion, hold nearly the same value that the Tennessee game did last year.
Well, and also just to further extend your point, I mean, then again, if you're going to make an argument, though, even I agree with you that, you were trying to prove yourself to the players, establish a relationship.
You should
there.
have seen that bench.
Oh, 100%. Oh,
I remember
unbelievable. But, I mean, they did wind up then losing to Dallas in Week 3, and Dak didn't even play that game. So the carryover after beating Tennessee and Carolina didn't hold a lot of weight, is my point.
It didn't hold weight in your one-loss record according to your stat sheet, but it held a lot of weight in that locker room and in this building.
And I'm not disputing that, but I'm looking at it, the caller's point was we were operating with wins-losses, though. And what I'm saying is that you then had a big divisional game early in the season, Week 3, at home again, like you have it here in Week 1, and you didn't win that game. So that's why I'm not putting a lot in percentage simply because you're looking at the rosters.
If you look at it from a pure mathematics perspective, which is what you're doing, and there's nothing wrong with that, it makes no difference at all. It really does not impact anything. Every game is its own game, and there is no such thing as momentum when they kick the ball off the following weekend. I understand that.
Because it's a different matchup, too.
I understand that. I will go on their side of the fence, though, and tell everybody that mentally and emotionally and psychologically, the Tennessee game last year was a huge, huge factor in the Giants getting off to that good start and eventually becoming a playoff team. That's not X's and O's. That's not numbers. Yeah. That's not paperwork. That's emotions. It's mentality. It's trust. It's respect. It's confidence. Those are all things you can't quantify.
Well, and it did help a lot, especially out of the gate, in terms of having a close game early in the season and finding a way to win.
No doubt.
I think from that standpoint, it was a good early test. Okay, hey, and they did have to rally because it was a tale of two halves, but went down to the wire. You tested the waters with the 2-point conversion, and then you were able to close out the game. So I think it helped from that standpoint.
Yes.
Beyond that, I don't know, once again, how much stock I put into, the carryover effect, because, once again, each week is going to pose a different challenge.
And to counter that point, I would not mind thrashing the Cowboys by 17 points opening night this year. It doesn't have to be.
I don't think the team would mind doing that either.
It doesn't have to be a close game. No. They could just thrash Dallas.
You don't get brownie points.
And that would be fine. It's okay.
Yeah, well, I mean, listen, no one on that roster is saying, well, we can afford to lose to the Cowboys because we're not going to, worry about not being able to win the following week. That's not the point of this conversation. The point is, it's just I think everybody puts so much into it's opening night, it's the first week, and this and that, and you realize it's a long season. And we've seen teams that start off, well, hold on, how many times have we seen the Giants have a really good first half of the season, right? They go 6-2. And then we've seen seasons where they go 2-6 in the second half, and they become 8-8.
Final thought. Well, Tom Coughlin's teams towards the end of his tenure,
that's my point,
had swoons.
Okay, so
I think
how much weight did that hold?
I think what has happened is during the latter stages of the last decade, when the Giants were in the quicksand, many of those seasons they had very disappointing Week 1 games, and it conditioned the fans emotionally to feel as though, oh boy, got to have that first game to try to turn the fortunes around.
Yeah.
It's all about emotions. We all know people overplay their emotions for Week 1. It happens in every NFL city.
But emotions don't win or lose football games. That's my point.
I got you. It's okay.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to make that clear.
Yep.
And once again, just to bring this full circle, there's a reason why I brought the Bengals example up. They were 0-2 at the beginning of last year, and they wound up making the playoffs.
We know about 2007 also.
There you go. Another example.
Sure.
Absolutely. All right, that is going to wrap up Monday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Appreciate everybody tuning in. And a reminder, today's episode of Big Blue Kickoff Live is part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. We'll be up and running again tomorrow at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. For Paul Dottino, I'm Lance Meadows. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest. And we'll speak to you Tuesday right here on BBKL. Have a good one.